and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. And that ends the reading. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. I had a dream about this moment. It's a little bit more of a nightmare. The day after Ken and I agreed about this, the switch for me preaching while he's away, I had a dream that I preached really long. And I was like so engrossed in my notes that I looked up and it like 40 minutes had gone by and there's only like 4 or 5 of you right here. So I'm sorry if it happens, but you got to stay to make my dream come true. No, don't worry, it's not going to happen. Yeah, the story of the 3 wise men, or the 3 kings, or the magi, whatever you call them. There's lots of different names or translations, right? We don't really know a lot about them. We don't even know, for example, if there were 3 of them, right? That's part of kind of our tradition because there's 3 gifts, right? The gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So there's a Western Christian tradition of 3, but in the Eastern Christian tradition, they actually think there was 12 of them. So lots of different perspectives. We don't even know for sure that they were all men or what their roles were. Kings or wise men are both translations of a Greek phrase, which is magos, from which we get the term magi. And this is a term that can be used to describe anything from philosophers to scientists to physicians, teachers, priests, astrologers, lots of different things. But I think the most important part of their role in this story is that they were from the East, which means, in other words, that they were from somewhere else, right? They were not from here. They were not one of us. They were outsiders. And in fact, in the eyes of the religious leaders of the time, the Magi would have been seen as inferior pagans, heathens. The religious leaders prided themselves as being representatives of God, separate from the world. But they had twisted the call to be a light and blessing into creating a wall of separation to keep themselves uncontaminated from people who thought differently than them. Right? Glad we don't have anyone like that around anymore. And part of that reasoning is they believed they were privileged to have received the revelation of God. And so why would they want to listen to someone else who hadn't heard anything from God? Well, you might imagine how ironic and unsettling it is then when these magi from the East, these outsiders, show up asking about this newborn king of the Jews, that they might worship him. They were probably wondering, what are they talking about? How did they find this out? How do they know what's going on? Do they know what's going on? Because apparently these scholars of the night had seen some celestial sign in the sky that had given them the clue that something was happening, something special. Some have guessed that maybe in their own writings from their own land, they had some prophecy about a divine teacher, or maybe they had gotten hold of the Hebrew scriptures and had studied part of that as well. Truth is, we don't really know for sure. But we do know that they showed up at the doorsteps of King Herod and the priests, asking about a new baby king. While those who were part of the Insider Club were busy staying safe and away from the heathens were looking for God, seeking God, listening to God. What a surprise to the Magi to show up expecting some grand celebration of the new king, right? Only to find that nobody knows what they're talking about. In fact, we find this out through the story, although the Magi don't know this, that Herod and the leaders in Jerusalem are actually filled with fear and are disturbed by this news. Very troubled. And I know this is jumping ahead in the Advent story, so please forgive me for messing up the sequence of the Advent season a little bit. But it strikes me as being particularly relevant to this theme of joy that we are thinking about today? Why is it that these magi were filled with joy at the birth of a child from a nation that they're not even a part of, while the people in Jesus' own country are weighed down with suspicion and fear and guardedness? Think about maybe how you might feel, though, if you were them. If you were considered a religious expert and someone comes to you who doesn't believe the same things you do and tells you what might be the most important spiritual revelation that there might be. Maybe your insider knowledge isn't what you thought it was. Maybe it's a little bit unsettling that these people are saying this, and not too long ago, some uneducated Jewish shepherds were saying something similar. All the people who shouldn't know anything about the special things you know about know something, and you don't know. Might feel like you're on the outside now instead of the inside. You might not be inclined to accept these new ideas, because to do so would mean that you had missed something, that you weren't as wise and knowledgeable as you might have thought. And maybe you haven't cornered the market on God like you thought. This idea, though, that the outside might really be the inside and the inside might be the outside is really core to the idea of the kingdom of God. It might be unsettling, disturbing, even angering to some, but this is the way of Christ, right? The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. Those who try to save their life will lose it, but those who lose their life for the kingdom will find it. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the outsiders. And this is not just something we find in the story of Christ, but throughout the scriptures as well. We see other examples where the outsiders are the ones who God goes to, who understand God when God's own people don't. There's the widow in Zarephath during the famine of Elijah's time, and Naaman of Syria, who is healed of leprosy. There's a Roman centurion whose faith is greater than anyone in Israel. And we have many outsiders like Rahab and Ruth, the Canaanite woman, and the woman at the well. You may notice a lot of these are women who are outsiders in their own right, who find a special connection with God and a special way of understanding God. And in fact, when this child, Jesus, grows up, raised by another lowly yet highly esteemed woman, Mary, he will highlight the faith of these outsiders. And when he marvels at the faith of the Roman centurion, he says that many of those on the inside will feel like they are really on the outside, while those on the outside will come and take their place at the feast of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. So what are we to make of all of this? It reminds me that knowledge and certainty and security do not guarantee us joy. Neither do positions of privilege or power. In fact, it is often those who seek a tight grasp on things, whether that be theology or politics or finances or family or the proper way to squeeze toothpaste out of a tube. People who have the tight grip often find it difficult to access joy. When our outlook on any aspect of life is narrow, joy doesn't have much room to join us, right? But when we are open, joy finds its place beside us, and joy finds a way to open our life to even more joy and even more life. I want to be clear, I'm not just talking about like this sickly sweet positivity that just turn that frown upside down and everything's going to be okay. But a perspective that looks at the uncertainties, looks at the unknowns, looks at the not yets, and in the midst of all of that, finds that there is something worth seeking, something like a star moving through the night, that when you find what you're looking for, it's not this pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but rather an opportunity to share your treasures, your gold and frankincense and myrrh with somebody in need, with somebody next to you, to care for others as well. Because this is the way of joy. This is the way of God. And it is found most often, sometimes by those on the outside who understand God best because they aren't limited by what God can or cannot be. I'm not sure where you find yourself in this story today, but my guess is that many of us feel like one of those outsiders. People who have been looked down on by religious leaders, who have been excluded or hurt by the church, who have been told that we don't really know what we're talking about when we talk about God and love. People who don't have all the answers and honestly don't even understand all the questions. But we know that there is something about this love, about this community, about this way of Christ that draws us here. And like the Magi, when they show up at the house of Mary and Joseph and Jesus, they are overwhelmed with joy. If that is you, I just want to encourage you not to diminish your own experience of God. Yes, always seek to grow and to learn in all things, but on that journey, don't discount the joy in God that you can experience right now and right here. God doesn't wait for you to be qualified in order to welcome you with open arms into the expansiveness of God's love. There may also be some of us who are more in the habit of being a teacher or an expounder of spiritual things, or of other things, really anything that you feel expertly on. I think we all have some of that. But anything you might feel that you've gotten pretty figured out. And sometimes we especially feel very certain of that when we are standing up front and have a microphone. Maybe it's in a moment like that, or during those family dinners during the holiday when you have that conversation with someone whose opinion is just as stubborn as yours. For us, for those in that moment, it's important to remember what Anne Lamott says, that the opposite of faith is not doubt, but certainty. As we share and connect, let us remember to be suspicious of those areas where we feel the most inflexible. And let us remember that joy comes not from gripping too tightly, but when we open our hands to receive the expansiveness of peace and joy around us. Wherever you find yourself during this Advent season, may we all remember this journey of the Magi, and may we too be open to the fullness of joy around us. Amen. Please stand, please rise in body or spirit for hymn